Hello and welcome to this episode of Geography Girl. Today we're going to be exploring the life and works of a trailblazing woman in the Soviet-era architecture, Jadwiga Grabowska-Hawrylak. She was the first woman to receive an architect's diploma after the war, and her architectural designs emerged during a transformation period in Poland's history, marked by political upheaval, post-war reconstruction, and the evolution of modernism. Jadwiga's legacy spanned much of the second half of the 20th century, played a key role in the reconstruction of Wrocław's monuments, and designed the city's first housing estates, modern schools, and residential buildings. With her modernist designs in the 1960s and 1970s, and postmodern aesthetic and later work in the 80s and 90s, her work bridged the gap between state-mandated socialist realism and the more experimental humanist modernist trends that emerged in the 20th century. Jadwiga had an interesting life. She survived occupation and devastation of her home country, Poland, and found a passion for architecture, studying at Wrocław University. As part of her diploma thesis, she created an Art Nouveau design for the Barish Brothers department store, and then found work in a state-owned architectural office to revive and renovate the old historical buildings that were destroyed during the war. Let's look at the urban landscape of Poland during the interwar period. Following the First World War, Art Deco and Expressionism were all the rage. Following the war, modernity became the focal point for national pride, negotiating with references to the nation's past in the form of national historical myths and symbolism. Architecture dependent on the establishment of the tale of a nation, shaping its memory and propagandizing its values. The Wrocław Cathedral, for example, were the burial grounds of Polish kings, heroes, and poets. In the interwar period, materials like granite, bronze, and marble were retracted from monuments that symbolized other periods, such as the German and Russian empires, in a symbolic reunification of an independent Polish state. Comprehending the sheer destruction of Poland during the Second World War is crucial to understanding Jadwiga's contribution to architecture and nation building in the country. The Second World War devastated many places in the world, but Poland was hit particularly hard. The country incurred the biggest loss of inhabitants, with 1/5 of the population being lost. 2/5 of the country's cultural property was destroyed, and it was forced to hand over 48% of its territory to the Soviet Union. Hardest hits were the cities. The city of Warsaw lost 85% of its city matter, 90% of its industry, and 70% of its housing. The Warsaw Ghetto was one of the largest ghettos during the Second World War and had seen 95% loss by 1943. The post-war period in Poland was marked by extensive reconstruction and urban planning efforts as cities were rebuilt from wartime destruction. Despite the dearth and despair, the environment provided a fertile ground for her architectural innovation. The city of Wrocław, which is the stage of much of today's story, saw a similar story of destruction. The southern and western districts had been destroyed up to 90%, and the old town and city centre were half destroyed. Of the 30,000 buildings that stood before the war, 21,000 had been destroyed, including hundreds of historic and cultural buildings, which Jadwiga herself worked on recovering in the early years as an architect. The Germans had occupied Wrocław, but within 3 days of surrender of the German command, it became once again under the administration of the People's Republic of Poland and within the borders of the Soviet Union. Amongst all the devastation, there was a push to create architecture that symbolized resilience and modernity, respecting Poland's historical and cultural identity, which is a critical part of Jadwiga's legacy. From 1949 to 1956, Polish architecture was dominated by socialist realism. During this period, many new districts were created in the cities built for the working classes. In architecture, this trend manifested as monumentalism, with the intent and effect of instilling respect for power under the new communist authority. Architecture in this period was defined as socialist in content and national in form, as the government focused on creating impressive and intimidating spaces, which were not exactly economical or affordable in terms of materials and costs. Like across the Soviet Union, housing estates were characterized by axial and symmetrical spatial solutions. Buildings were located around large squares and along wide avenues. Outer facades located by main transport routes were given an impressive appearance, whilst everyday apartments were neglected. We've covered how architecture has been used as a tool for propaganda before in Geography Girl, in my Soviet influence in Central Asia video, and looking at Mussolini's influence in Italian architecture during his reign. In Poland, things were no different, being the stage for construction of new buildings, districts and cities, and also removing structures that symbolise the rejected bourgeois ideals. An example would be construction workers in the district of Warsaw. which was specifically designed to implement social justice and create equality amongst tens of thousands of working class citizens, bringing them back into the cities which were previously dominated by higher social classes. The Manhatten of Wrocław is an urban icon. It's a cluster of buildings constructed between 1970 and 73, a fraction of the size of its New York counterpart, but designed with the same concepts in mind. It was inspired by the work of urban planner Le Corbusier. These 6 16-story blocks were designed in modernist style, with an intricate facade and futuristic aesthetic. These were originally designed in 1967 by our girl Jadwiga. It certainly had the space-age feel and were considered at the time to be pretty far out, contrasting with the more monotonous architecture of socialist-era housing that dominated the skyline. Jadwiga brought a refreshing feel to the city, incorporating a Mediterranean vibe to the concrete, prefabricated structures in a way that was revolutionary. They were decorated with a white, rounded facade with curved patios and balconies, which earned the buildings the nickname the Sedwoswe, or toilet seat buildings. The complex is placed on a platform with garages and parking lots underneath, a design measure to functionally and optically separate the urban and residential areas. Prefabricated concrete was an iconic building facade built in H-shaped grids, and the balconies and the windows seemed to shift from each other, giving it its iconic look. It was iconic due to its creative use of resources in a time where these were hard to come by, and in a way that pushed the boundaries during the period of state reconstruction. The towers were part of a larger master plan to modernise the Plac Grunwaldzki area, bringing together green areas, planting exotic foliage and garden oases on the roofs and public gardens, and public amenities in a forward-thinking approach to urban living. It emphasised livability and incorporating natural light and outdoor spaces. It was a brave step forward, initially receiving some side-eye for its unconventional aesthetic, but slowly gained recognition as a true masterpiece. As much of her most iconic urban manifestations, we can see her commitment to futurism aesthetic through the designs that she could not bring to life. Through the 1970s, she submitted many bids in architectural competitions, one of which was a utopian concept of a building complex called the Ecosystem, which was designed for the iconic Terra One exhibition in 1975 by Stephen Muller. But by the end of the 1970s, economic crises had stopped the state from making major investments. She retired in 1991, but still worked on many smaller projects, including the Church of Christ, which finished in 1990 in Wrocław. It was a powerful design that draws its attention from its towers made from reinforced concrete. It's safe to say that our girl was a trailblazer who navigated a male-dominated field and left a lasting imprint on Polish urban landscapes. Her works have gained international attention, particularly as part of exhibitions on post-war modernism in Central and Eastern Europe. Jadwiga's work is a critical point for historians and architects alike as an example of the intersection of modernism, brutalism, and socialist-era design. Jadwiga's work broke the mould of socialist housing, showcasing the potential for beauty and innovation in functional architecture, and that's why we love her. I really hope you enjoyed this episode today, and we love to see a woman bucking the trend and being at the top of her game. Please give us a like and subscribe. New videos come out every Tuesday, and I'll see you next week. All the best. Goodbye.